द वे फॉरवर्ड इज तुहाडा फिर तो स्वागत है। मैं तुहाडा होस्ट हरजोत सिंह। अज असी इस शो ते सेवा की गल कर रहे हैं। हुण असी गल करांगे एक बड़ी ही अमेजिंग सेवा। तुसी पिछले दिनों विच ये पिक्चर वेखी होनी जो कि इंटरनेट ते न्यूज़पेपर्स ते अराउंड द वर्ल्ड वेखी गई है। ये एक सेवादार हैगे सिमरन सिंह जी, सिमरन सिंह स्ट्रिप नागल। I hope I pronounced it right. Luckily, we have Simran Singh ji in the studios today. We are honored to have. I'll first tell you about the picture. Simran Singh ji, ये जेडी पिक्चर है, ये यूक्रेन दी है। जब रशिया दी लड़ाई शुरू होंदी है यूक्रेन दे नाल, उत्थे दे एक शहर विच एक खबर आंदी है कि गुरु साहब दे कुछ स्वरूपन, कुछ सांचीअन, कुछ गुटके साहबन जेड़े कि अनअटेंडेड हैगे एक गुरु घर विच बिकॉज ऑफ द वॉर पीपल हैड टू लिव। ते एक गुरु दे प्यारे सेवादार सिमरन सिंह जी ने उत्थे जाके इन चीज़ां नू पूरे ऑनर नाल, पूरे अदब दे नाल, सिखी रिवायत दे अकॉर्डिंग इन्हां नू चक के उस जगह तो कढ़िया और अक्रॉस द बॉर्डर वो लैके गए। ये उस चीज़ की पिक्चर है। टुडे वी आर ऑनर्ड टू हैव सिमरन सिंह खालसा जी अमंगस्ट अस। सिमरन जी तुहाडा बहुत बहुत स्वागत है।
थैंक यू सो मच। वाहिगुरू जी का खालसा,
वाहिगुरू जी का खालसा, वाहिगुरू जी की फतेह। सिमरन सिंह जी, साडा बहुत मान हुंदा है सानू इस गल ते तुहाडी जिहड़ी ये सेवा असी देखी है और ये जिहड़ी स्टोरी है इसदा जिहड़ा बैकग्राउंड है। वी आर प्रिविलेज्ड टू हैव यू इन द स्टूडियोज टुडे। सानू तुसी इस स्टोरी दे बारे विच, इस इंसीडेंट दे बारे च दसो, इस दी मोटिवेशन दे बारे च और की होया, किन सर्कमस्टांसिस होया। मैं अपने व्यूअर्स नू दसां कि सिमरन सिंह खालसा जी, सिमरन जी, आई एम सॉरी, आई हैव बीन स्ट्रगलिंग टू प्रोनाउंस योर लास्ट नेम। इज इट स्ट्रिप नागल?
Your pronunciation is perfect. Very impressive. Thank you.
Thank you. मैं अपने व्यूज़ नू दसां कि सिमरन सिंह जी अकाल सिक्योरिटी जिहड़ी कंपनी हैगी है उसदे कॉर्पोरेट स्ट्रैटेजी दे हेड हैगे। उसदे अलावा ही इज़ इन्वॉल्वड विद सेवरल सिख ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस, सिख धर्मा इंटरनेशनल, सिख अमेरिकन वेटरन्स अलायंस, सिख अमेरिकन लीगल डिफेंस एंड एजुकेशन ट्रस्ट, विश्व सिख विचार संस्था। उसदे अलावा मेरी पीरी अकैडमी। मैं उन्होंने आई अर्ज हिम कि सब तो पहले वो सानू अपनी सेवा दे बारे थोड़ी जी बैकग्राउंड दसन कि वो की सेवा निभा रहे हैं सी कौम में।
Well, what happened in Ukraine was we saw this incredible flood of refugees. And I'm German by birth, and that's just 2 countries over. And so in the UK and in the US and in Germany, and really our Sangat in France, we all work together to try to understand how can we get food to the people there. Even today, 60% of Ukrainians don't believe they're going to have enough to eat this week. It's really a horrible situation when the full supply network stops functioning. And Ukraine is an agricultural country, and even the agriculture stops in war. So the first thing we did is we went to Warsaw with some food in hand, and we tried to understand like what's the need, because in the fog of war the information is really incomplete. You don't know what's happening. Everyone is tired. There's a kind of chaos, and some people said food is needed everywhere. Some people said no food is needed. We just went to try to find out. Okay, then we stopped at the Gurdwara in Warsaw, Poland, which had become a refugee center. They had enough food there, but they told us that the Sanchia of Guruji Maharaj had been left in Odessa, and that's the first time we learned about it. And of course, immediately decided to go. We learned this from some Ukrainian Sikhs who could not go back in the country, because once you're in the country, as a man, you're not allowed to leave. You have to stay in military service. So this is a very difficult situation for people, and a huge inner turmoil for not knowing what to do about this horrible situation.
असी अपनी व्यूज़ नू दसिए कि सिमरन सिंह स्ट्रिप नागल जी उत्थे जिथे कि हमेशा खालसा दी रिवायत दे अकॉर्डिंगली ਜਿੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਪਰੇਸ਼ਾਨੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ, ਡਿਫਿਕਲਟੀਜ਼ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ, ਉੱਥੇ ਸੇਵਾ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਪਹੁੰਚਦੇ ਨੇ। ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਯੂਕਰੇਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਵਾਰ ਦੀ ਸਿਚੁਏਸ਼ਨ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਇਹ ਉੱਥੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਲੰਗਰ ਛਕਾਉਣ ਦੀ, ਫੂਡ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੇਵਾ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਕਰਕੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਗਏ ਸੀਗੇ, ਉੱਥੇ ਸੇਵਾ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸੀਗੇ। ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪਰਟੀਕੂਲਰ ਪਿਕਚਰ ਹੈ, ਸਿਮਰਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ, I would like you to explain what is it that you're carrying on your head and what is the seva that you have committed?
Well, what I'm carrying on my head is, of course, the Sanchya of Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. There are 2 sets, one in Gurmukhi and one in Hindi, and about 30-40 gutke, Sukhmani Sahib and Nitnem gutke, and that's everything we found in Odessa when we visited there. Of course, the journey was complicated because Odessa at the time was this picture we're seeing now. That's on the flight back to London. That's kind of the happiest part of the journey. That Guruji Maharaj had a seat. I had the seat next to it. It was really interesting to the people working the flight. Ki, why did you buy a seat for this box? And I explained to them, ki, to us, this is our link to God. And they were really touched and even gave chocolate for Guruji, which I brought as a gift to the people at the airport. It was very, very sweet. But getting there was complicated. And I have 2 small daughters, 8 and 10 years old. And actually, you know, they're 10 and 12 years old. They've grown. But they grow fast. But I had to be really careful. You're going into an active war zone. And the day before I arrived, the beach in Odessa had gotten bombed. And this was a strategic point for the Russians because that part of Ukraine is attached to Moldova. Over Moldova, there's a no-fly zone, so you have to go one country over and drive. But there's about a region with about 500,000 people. That's a Russian separatist region that the Russians needed to get through to Odessa so they could do the circle around Ukraine and then move into the middle. So it was a very strategic point. And we know now it was just one Ukrainian stronghold that held off the Russian advance. Otherwise, that whole city would have been destroyed. The bombing at the beaches had started, and we were really trying to figure out how to do this safely for all parties involved.
And you were already in Odessa at that time?
No, I went from Warsaw into Ukraine to bring the food.
Okay.
Then I went to London to a human rights conference where I met with the Defense Sikh Network. We have hundreds of soldiers in the UK military, and I met the vice chair there, Pritpal Singh, and I said, "Can you come with me?" And in my mind, I knew if he's coming, then I'm definitely going to be protected because he works for the UK government. He made the request right away that I would like to go, and of course that was declined.
So where were you when somebody approached you with this request, when you were told that this is a situation at a Gurdwara in Odessa and this is the seva that is required? Where were you at that time?
Yeah, that was the Gurdwara in Poland, in Warsaw, which had become a refugee center.
Okay. You were in Warsaw, Poland, and somebody told you that this is a situation, and then you volunteered to go to Odessa?
Well, I didn't have to volunteer, really. At that point, there's no choice for any of us. Then I just felt that Guruji had given me this blessing. Yeah, I was explaining, I think, in a radio show, maybe it was the BBC, because the story became quite interesting, especially in England, because the Sanchya went to the National Sikh Museum in the UK, which is where they're now waiting to be returned when the Gurdwara opens again and the Sangat comes. But what I was trying to explain is that we don't make a decision, we don't volunteer to go. The Guru calls us, and also we're not rescuing the Sanchya or any Swarup of the Guru. That it's just our seva and our luck that we're so blessed to get to go. And it felt that way. It was a very peaceful journey. I took a hukamnama before, of course. What should I do? And the hukamnama came, Bolo Ram Ram, and the borders will drop, and you can cross the ocean. So whenever I got stuck at a military checkpoint, that shabad started playing in my head, and things worked out.
So how far was Odessa from Warsaw?
Well, I first went to London, and from London to go and come back took 3 days. It was a 3-day journey, yeah.
And how long did you have to walk after you were able to carry?
You know, the picture is a little deceptive because I didn't walk that much. Maybe a couple hundred, 400 or 500 yards here and there. Of course, it would be nice to say I carried that box with Guruji through a war zone, but mostly we were driving, and the people driving us were Ukrainian women who could go in and out of the border, and they understood that we had brought food to Lviv, where people were starving. At that point, there's 200,000 refugees just in that city, inside the Ukraine, and that was also getting hit by cruise missiles. And when they learned that we helped their people, and they feel very left alone, then they volunteered to drive us. So I was going in Ukrainian vehicles with Ukrainian women who are married to people from the self-defense organizations. And they really were the heroes, because they didn't know like what we want. Asi kehne sakte, this is our guru.
Yeah.
This is our link to God. They just think, oh, you're getting something.
It must be difficult to explain. They must be thinking there's some hidden treasure or something in those boxes.
And there was a border where they thought I was smuggling cultural goods out of the Ukraine. And I had to explain, this is our link to God. And to you it's a book, to me it's my life. So it was interesting in that way, yeah.
ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਬੜੀ ਐਕਸਟਰਾਆਰਡੀਨਰੀ ਸਟੋਰੀ ਹੈ, ਬੜੀ ਇੱਕ ਅਮੇਜ਼ਿੰਗ ਸਟੋਰੀ ਹੈ। ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਗੁਰੂ ਘਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੀਗੇ, ਵਾਰਸਾ ਪੋਲੈਂਡ ਵਿੱਚ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉੱਥੇ ਪਤਾ ਚੱਲਿਆ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਗੁਰੂ ਘਰ ਹੈ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਸਾਂਝੀਆਂ ਪਈਆਂ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕੁਝ ਸਰੂਪ ਪਏ ਨੇ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਰੈਸਕਿਊ ਵਰਡ ਨਹੀਂ ਯੂਜ਼ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ। ਇਹ ਉੱਥੇ ਗਏ, ਇਹ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਇੰਗਲੈਂਡ ਗਏ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਪੂਰਾ ਉੱਥੇ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਚੀਜ਼ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਇਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ। ਬਟ ਇਹ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਟਰੈਵਲ ਕਰਕੇ ਓਡੀਸ਼ਾ ਉਸ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਗਏ, ਔਰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਆਲਰੇਡੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਦੇ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਹੈਲਪ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸੀਗੇ, ਯੂਕਰੇਨੀਅਨਸ ਦੀ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਰੋਟੀ ਖਵਾ ਰਹੇ ਸੀਗੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਲਈ ਲੰਗਰ ਲਾ ਰਹੇ ਸੀਗੇ। ਤੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਹੈਲਪ ਕੀਤੀ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਡੀਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਫੀਮੇਲਸ ਨੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਔਰਤਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬਿਠਾ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਉੱਥੇ ਤੱਕ ਲੈ ਗਏ। ਇਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪੋਸੀਬਲ ਹੋ ਪਾਇਆ, ਉਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉੱਥੇ ਦੀ ਲੋਕਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪੋਪੂਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਸੀ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡੀ ਹੈਲਪ ਸੀ। ਔਰ ਇੱਕ ਚੀਜ਼ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਮਝ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ, ਉਨ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਕਲਚਰ ਦਾ, ਸਾਡੇ ਧਰਮ ਦਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਇੱਕ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜੀਵਿਤ ਗੁਰੂ ਮੰਨਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਲਈ ਸਮਝਣਾ ਔਖੀ ਹੈ। ਔਰ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝਾਇਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਕੀ ਲੈਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਆ ਰਿਹਾ, ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਬੜੀ ਹੀ ਅਮੇਜ਼ਿੰਗ ਔਰ ਬੜੀ ਐਕਸਟਰਾਆਰਡੀਨਰੀ ਸਟੋਰੀ ਹੈ। ਸਿਮਰਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ, at an institution level, at a government level, was any help offered by any government and institutions?
Well, the fascinating thing that happened, I won't say it was government institutional help, but when I asked the Defense Sikh Network if they could help, they came into a moral conundrum because they made the request immediately, let us go to Ukraine and receive our scriptures. That was declined all the way at the top level of the UK Defense Ministry, because how can NATO soldiers go into Ukraine, even if it's for spiritual reasons? So they were quite upset, and then I could go. So they agreed to help me. There's a narrow land bridge. The Russians are on the ocean on the right, and in this Moldovan separatist region on the left. And you have to go through, and the warships are there ready to launch missiles. And I had to drive into that. But I felt so relaxed because I kept sharing my location and kept getting the latest updates from London. Ki, what's happening? And are you safe? And can you proceed? So the Ukrainian women driving me knew which way to go and how to talk to the soldiers at the military checkpoints. There was tanks, there was massive bunkers. This was a city ready for war. But I also knew that somebody was watching, generally the Aryan could tell me, this way you can go, this way don't go. So I had information from both sides, and that was obviously a huge blessing. Now, that was a little bit difficult because should soldiers help somebody going into the Ukraine, it's pretty diplomatically sensitive situation. That can be misunderstood. That can be understood as I could be considered a spy or anything. And
it's difficult to explain to those people what exactly they might not understand it the way you under the sensitivity of it.
And then I have three Russian visas in my passport. So they were looking through that. And then and they were tired and nervous and ready for bombardment. But then it was the Ukrainian woman who could have that conversation. So I felt totally safe. But now the amazing thing that happened is the Major General Celia Harvey, the deputy commander of the UK Field Army, running massive military operations for the UK military, came out and said this mission was brilliantly executed through careful planning, wonderful coordination, and at great success. So there did come a point when the military did say on Twitter, this was wonderfully done. And that was really, now we can talk about it. At that point, we couldn't really say, Ki, what's going on?
ਅਸੀਂ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਪ੍ਰਾਚੀਨ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਗੌਰਵ, ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਬਟ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਸਮਝਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਕਿ ਖਾਲਸੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹ ਸਪਿਰਿਟ, ਉਹ ਜਜ਼ਬਾ ਔਰ ਉਹ ਬਲੇਸਿੰਗ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੁਰੂ ਦੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਹਾਲੇ ਵੀ ਸ਼ਾਮਿਲ ਹੈ। ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦੇ ਜੁਝਾਰੂ ਸਿੰਘ ਹਾਲੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ਾਮਿਲ ਹਨ ਔਰ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਆਪਣੀ ਜਾਨ ਦੀ ਪਰਵਾਹ ਕੀਤੇ ਬਿਨਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਇੱਕ ਪਾਸੇ ਰਸ਼ੀਆ ਦੀ ਆਰਮੀ ਹੈ, ਇੱਕ ਪਾਸੇ ਮੋਲਡੋਵਾ ਦੇ ਸੈਪਰੇਟਿਸਟ ਹੈਗੇ। ਬੜੀ ਥੋੜੀ ਨੈਰੋ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਸੀ ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜੋ ਇਹ ਕਾਰਨਾਮਾ ਅੰਜਾਮ ਦਿੱਤਾ। ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਦੀ ਜਿੰਨੀ ਸ਼ਲਾਘਾ ਕਰੀਏ ਉਹ ਘੱਟ ਹੈ। ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਹੋਰ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਇੱਕ ਛੋਟੀ ਜੀ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਦੇ ਬਾਅਦ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖਦੇ ਰਹੋ ਦ ਵੇ ਫਾਰਵਰਡ। द वे फॉरवर्ड इज ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਫਿਰ ਤੋਂ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਹੋਸਟ ਹਰਜੋਤ ਸਿੰਘ। ਸਿਮਰਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ, recently you took a peace delegation to Israel as a Sikh. Can you tell me what was this delegation about and what was the motive behind?
I went to Israel with a group of American Muslim women whose main purpose for visiting was to understand the Israeli culture and to understand how can you improve relationships between the Muslim world and Israel. We had the Abraham Accords, which open up diplomatic relationships with some countries in Israel, and others are thinking about following and normalizing relationships. And so I learned a lot about what Israel is like and what they know about Sikhs, what they don't know about us, and how many similarities there are between our cultures.
Can you throw a little light on that?
Well, first of all, Sikhs we're the 5th largest religion in the world. Number 6 is Jews.
And the population is right
almost the same. If the Jews hadn't had the Holocaust in Nazi Germany, in that Holocaust, then they would be number 5 and we'd be number 6. So it's really very tragic why we're number 5. And we should remember that when we talk about we're a large world religion, which is true, that a whole group got killed. And is therefore has fewer population. But what's important for Israelis to know, which they don't, and which they have huge feelings about when they learn it, is there have been multiple Holocausts against Sikhs, both in the 1700s, obviously. There's a reason Guru Har Gobind Ji had 2 swords, and after, and as recently as 1980s and 90s in the Punjab. When the Israelis learned this, because their identity is very much defined by what it was like to have a group try to kill all of you. We know that feeling. When they realize that we had similar experiences, their hearts just open and they consider us very close to them. But then there's been no education. Another similarity is that Jewish men wear a kippah, which is a head covering. Guess what that stands for? That stands for respect for God and knowing that God is above everything. And don't we wear the turban for a similar reason? And when you travel to an area you don't know with a turban, you have to think, is it safe? What precautions do I have to take? And you're always kind of aware of your environment. When they wear the kippah, it's the same feeling. They also have a complicated multi-religious environment. In Jerusalem, there is Christians, there's Muslims, and there's Jews. In the Punjab, we have Sikhs, Muslims, Hindus, and the Buddhists have been killed there. We remember the Taliban destroyed the Buddhist statues about 20 years ago. That used to be a Buddhist area also. And these are 2 regions where all these religions and faiths come together. The similarities are really unbelievable, and both have, in my opinion, a responsibility to work for peace for everybody around them. When we put our turban on, we know, and we put our kirpan, we know our job is to protect people. That we have to protect people when the call comes. It's our duty as Sikhs, and Jews have the same duty. And I think this relationship between Jews and Sikhs should really become very established, and we should hold each other to the same standard and develop a lot of love.
No, Simran Singh ji, I applaud you for what you're saying. We need to create these bridges with other communities, and Jewish community particularly is a community. We have a lot of similarities, we have a lot of commonalities. We can understand each other. We should really work to improve that relationship, along with relationships with other communities.
With all other communities. But this one happens to be very close to us. Very, very close to us. We just haven't learned that.
ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਜਾਰੀ ਰੱਖਾਂਗੇ ਇੱਕ ਛੋਟੀ ਜੀ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਦੇ ਬਾਅਦ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖਦੇ ਰਹੋ ਦ ਵੇ ਫਾਰਵਰਡ। ਦ ਵੇ ਫਾਰਵਰਡ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਫਿਰ ਤੋਂ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਹੋਸਟ ਹਰਜੋਤ ਸਿੰਘ। Simran Singh ji, the entire exercise that you took, right? It gives a great message and introduces the world to Sikhi, something which people still don't know much about. ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੇਵਾ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ, ਔਰ particularly ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ law enforcement ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ Sikhs ਹੈਗੇ, can you quickly tell us how does it spread the word?
Our core identity is the protection of other people. That's our kirpan. That's the symbol of our turban. I did work at a call security for a long time, and we were the largest employer of retired American police officers in the world at a time where we're not allowed to serve in uniform. That's now changed. SALDEF led the initiative to get the first police department in major police department in U.S. history, which was Washington, D.C., to allow turbans and beards. And you're an attorney, and so you know what it's like in the courtroom when you have to make a case and you look different. There's some stigma, some symbol you have to overcome, and you have to be really good. So we have police officers now, we have attorneys and trial lawyers. One thing we don't have a lot of is judges, and there's never in U.S. history been a judge elected with a turban. Some judges are appointed, some judges are elected. So there's an amazing election happening now in Santa Fe County. It's a Democratic county, which means the primary wins the race every time, might even run unopposed. That primary is on June 7th. And we have with us Devatma Singh Khalsa, who is like you, a lawyer and a trial lawyer, and who is now in that race and is doing quite well. He's just received the unanimous endorsement from the Santa Fe Police Association, which is huge, which means the police are saying, we want to work with this judge. His platform is compassion and competence, and that it's a judge's job to protect the victims, but also to protect people who have difficulty working within the system. The legal system in the U.S. can be very brutal on especially people without means. And sure.
Yeah. No, I said we have the privilege of having Dev Atma Singh ji with us today through Skype. Dev Atma Singh ji, thank you so much for taking all the time. You're very welcome to The Way Forward.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Waheguru Ji Ki Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. You know, as Simran Singh ji said, we have people in law enforcement. We don't have too many people sitting on the benches, and it's very important. And it's very important to bring that Sikh identity and the ideals to the jurisprudence, to the system of justice in this country. Please tell us more about yourself, and please tell us how do you see your faith influencing your role as a judge?
Well, thank you for that question. I absolutely think that my relationship to Guru will play a role, but I want to be very clear that I became Sikh because it's very different than a typical religion. I don't see addiction, for example, as a moral issue. I think we tend to look at things through a black and white lens, but that does a disservice for the actual adjudication and the bringing out of justice and truth. We know, for example, that addiction, we now have the neurological basis clear of addiction. And we know those people who are very addicted are of a diminished capacity, more or less. And so my faith tells me that as a judge, I need to see things through that very secular lens, really, in order to be the last line of defense, essentially, for the people that can't represent themselves or speak for themselves in court.
Oh, that's amazing. Atma Singh ji, we understand you're a practicing attorney. Is it right?
That's correct. I work for the First Judicial District Attorney's Office here in Santa Fe, Rio Arriba, and Los Alamos counties.
So tell us more about this race. Are all the people running for the position, are they lawyers or?
No, it's pretty typical in the United States to have the requirement to be a lawyer before you become a judge. But in a lot of places, New Mexico included, and a lot of places that are rural, there's a sort of reservation for the representation of the people on the bench, and that's one of these roles. A magistrate is considered the low level of the court because it only adjudicates cases under a year of criminal penalty and disputes under $10,000. So that general sense of fairness has been very important. Now, here in Santa Fe, we're facing a crisis because there's a lot of people moving in, especially since the pandemic, and that's creating a number of problems around housing, around we have longstanding issues with addiction here, and our numbers on violence against women are terrible. And so I really see this role as ground zero for all social issues that we're facing them here, but we're facing them everywhere in the United States. And so getting involved and bringing that I don't want to say a spiritual perspective, but believing it's possible to have good government and to do these things fairly and to have a forward-facing administration that actually does the extra work, goes the extra mile, and makes sure that people can get connected to services. That's incredibly important. We have a lot of community support for that here, but we have one of the typical problems that less well-funded states have, which is there just kind of seems to be a resistance to a top-down approach, and also the actors in the state government aren't always talking together. So I really want to be activist in that way and cut through the red tape.
You know, Atma Singh ji, it's very important, and I can't even put in words what a service you're doing to the community by offering yourself for a position like this. You see, I'm a practicing attorney as well. I do jury trials, but I do it in New York. New York has a very diverse community. People have seen Sikhs. They know us. They understand. Most of the judges know who Sikhs are. The jury members know. But there was a recent incident in Mississippi, I guess, where a Sikh was asked to leave the court, and the judge said, "I don't want anyone wearing these rags with rags around their head to be sitting in my court." So there is a lack of awareness, which I'm sure with somebody like you who's already serving as a lawyer, you're doing that service. If you get to sit on that bench, that would be a great service to the community. And not just that, it would be a great service to the community you are serving as a judge, because we can see how alive you are to your spiritual responsibility as a Sikh. I'll really appreciate if you can take a minute, tell us about your journey into Sikhism. That would be awesome if you can do that.
Sure. Well, it kind of starts with me being in college, and I was biking to school. This is at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. I'm biking to school one day and got hit by a car. And that left an injury that I wasn't able to uncover until many years later through an MRI. And it stopped my ability to go running or do really much of any exercise. And so that put me on a path to find yoga, which started actually turning my body on and bringing my awareness to my body in a way that began to open up a kind of healing. I was raised Methodist, but at that time was atheistic and agnostic. But going on that healing journey, it brought some other things with it. God has a way, and I would say that it's not a rational decision. It's a calling. It's something where after doing the yoga for a few years and finding the Kundalini yoga in particular, which has the Gurbani mantra and really calls forth the spirit as part of the exercise, it was sort of inevitable. And I put on a turban when I was in grad school in 2007. I had just moved to Santa Fe for the first time a year before that, and the rest is history. I changed my name 10 years ago, which, by the way, that incident in Mississippi is less than 10 years ago, and that's at the exact kind of court, the lowest level court, the place where I hope to serve my community, because in the poorer states, we have, when there is that representative factor built in, you get sort of populist ideas, and that can be dangerous. Here in Santa Fe, we have a very large population of addicted people, and part of what makes that, what keeps that going, is the shame cycle of just the sort of cultural narratives that exist in this area. And so we need clear vision to see that and to not let it affect our judgment, because shame operates in our society in a very negative way.
There must have been a point, to get more directly to Harjot's question. You started meditating and doing exercises, but where you said, the Sri Guru Granth is my guru, that's my path to God. You grew out your beard, you started wearing your turban, and this became your identity in this world. What was that point for you? When did you realize that Guru Nanak's message is the message that you want to live your life by?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that I know the exact moment, but I can tell you that I put the turban on in October 2007, and I put it on for 40 days, and then I took it off for 40 days. In a little control in the experiment. And it was night and day. It became very clear to me that wearing a turban means you're an ambassador, and that elevates your consciousness on some level just from the word jump. And the more I learn about Sikh culture, I'm still a baby when it comes to Sikh culture, and I will say that I've noticed by watching others and my own reactions that there tends to be a point where you realize you're a baby and that you're always going to be a baby. That there's going to be no end to the learning, and that either it intimidates you or you offer your head. And we're all
on a journey. We're all on this path. Atma Singh ji, I wish you the very best. It's a very important service to the community, and we say Nanak Naam Chaddi Kala Tere Pane Sarbat Da Bhala. Our end goal is always Sarbat Da Bhala. So if we can take that word, if we can, it's not just about identity, it's about the values, and if you can serve with those values, I think it serves everyone. It's great. The idea of service. I'll quickly, I'll conclude by asking you. You were telling me something about service, which is interfaith, something you're doing in Israel, something which you want to do all across the world. Can you please tell me? We don't have too much time left for the show.
Well, I recently traveled to Israel with a peace on a peace mission with a group of Muslim women who have it very dear to their heart to normalize relationship between Israel and the Muslim world. And I realized a lot of things about the similarities between Sikhi and the Sikh way of life and the Jewish faith. And I also realized that nobody there knows what is a Sikh, and its knowledge about Jews is very limited in the Sikh community.
Simran Singh ji, I wish we had more time. It's very important. It's very profound. You know, we're all in this together, right? We need to share our message. We need to share our message with other communities. What Atma Singh ji is doing, he'll take that message to other people. Those people, incidents like what happened in Mississippi, that's a shame that they're happening in the 21st century, not just for Sikhs, but for this country, for the entire world. I am so thankful for all that you do and that you've done, and I'm so thankful to Atma Singh ji for all that he is doing and he aspires to do. Both of you, thank you so much for taking all the time, for talking to us, for enlightening our viewers. I wish you both the very best. Thank you very much. ਇਹ ਸੀ ਸਾਡਾ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਸ਼ੋਅ। ਦੇਖਣ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਬਹੁਤ ਸ਼ੁਕਰੀਆ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖਦੇ ਰਹੋ The Way Forward।